Hello, everybody. So we're going to be talking about Vue, intro to the Vue framework. So to get started, we're going to run this npm install -g @vue/CLI command to install the Vue command line. While that's going, let's talk a little bit about what Vue is. So I'm hoping by the end of this, you'll be able to create Vue. Say create basic Vue apps. So what is Vue? Vue is, if we look at the spectrum of opinionation in the JavaScript front-end world right now. So stuff with essentially no opinionation, that would be stuff like React. Stuff with very high opinionation, that'd be stuff like Ember. Ember is basically Rails for the front end. And was like made by many of the same people. I would put Vue almost dead center between these. And just as a point of reference, I'd probably put Angular somewhere in here. But Vue feels an awful lot like React in that it's essentially just a component framework, and you can do very light stuff in the same way that you can with React. However, we get more robust command line tools, we get better testing tools, we get a better router, and all that stuff is designed to work in a way more integrated fashion than I think it does in React. So let's, can I get a thumbs up if you've got React or Vue installed, the CLI? Cool. What do you need, Luke? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to make then. So let's do Barkwire. Why not? All right, so the Barkwire app is going to have a logo, and it's going to have maybe a list of dogs down the side, and then like you click on one and a dog shows up. And it's got a picture and a name and a profile and stuff. That's the app we're going to make. So to get started, we do Vue create and then the name of the app, like that. And unlike the React command line, create React app, we're actually going to get a bunch of options. Oops, I already have one. Backwire 1. So we're going to manually select features. And then we pick the ones that we want. We want Babel. Babel is, who knows what Babel is? Just tell me, Kat.
It converts your code into the browser language, essentially.
Also, even stuff that's JavaScript, but maybe it's a feature that isn't supported by a particular browser. You write it one way, and it figures out what that needs to look to hit whatever your target browsers are. That's Babel's job. We can put TypeScript in. We can add PWA support. We're going to add the router. We're going to add Vuex. That's kind of like Redux. We're going to add a CSS preprocessor. We can leave in the linter. And we're going to leave, for this purpose of this, we're going to leave out unit testing and end-to-end testing. So Babel, router, Vuex, CSS preprocessor, linter formatter. And that's going to say, do we want to use history mode for the router? Yes, we do, which is the default. And then for our CSS preprocessor, let's use SCSS. The first one's fine. And then for our linter, first one's fine also. And first option here is fine. And then let's put this in package.json. And it'll let us save this as a preset if we want also. So then it's going to install all these dependencies that we said that we wanted. So right off the bat, we're already in much better shape than we were with Create React App.
Did we say it's for presets or future projects?
You can if you want to. I never do. Cool. While this is all going, let's talk a little bit about how we get to this. Because the approach that we take with a Vue app is, in my opinion, a lot more app-like in kind of the opposite direction we tend to do it with React apps, where we go, okay, here's this small component that I put in this bigger component, that I put in this bigger component, that I put in this bigger component. This is... The workflow I'll usually use with the Vue app is like, what's the URL? I'll start with that. And there's a big reason why, and I think this gets overlooked in React land a lot. The URL is a serialization of the state of the app. I want you to think about that for a sec. The URL is a serialization of the state of the app. So the URL, what do I mean by serialization? What's that mean in human language?
What'd you say?
Serialization, what's that mean?
Just turning it into a string.
Turning it into a string. So having some string representation of the state of the app. It's not an object, it's not anything, it's just a bunch of fucking characters. It's a serialization of the state. In this case, state is like literally the state in some cases. It can also just be, I'm on this page and I have this thing selected of the app. And this is significant because if you send somebody a URL, you expect them to see the same thing that you're seeing. That's the entire point of a URL. And I think with like the more flexible router options like React Router and stuff, that entire thing just gets missed. This is really the first thing you need to figure out is what URL or what route am I going to be working with? And then the next thing I'll figure out is what data does it need? I guess as a subnote for this, make a route plus a view. Make a fetch. Then I'll say what components does it need? That's kind of my process for approaching these things. So we're trying to make this, the things that show up on every single page, we put that at the top level. It's called app by convention, just like it is in React. I hop over to this Barkwire folder that we made. And run npm run serve. And that'll fire up our development server. If I go to 8081, cool, I got a Vue app. The View app does a pretty good job of giving you an idea of how View apps tend to be scaffolded. As a brief tour, we have a public folder and we have a source folder. I believe there's a similar concept with Create React App. Public folder, this stuff just gets copied over as is whenever we build the app. And then our source is the stuff that's going to end up being compiled into the app. And then the rest of this is the config shit that we just set up. So the source folder, it's not empty or just everything piled into one thing like it is in Create React App. We have this broken up in a couple different files. We have assets. This is going to be images, any other data that we are like binary assets that we want to use in the application. And this is kind of interesting. There's this split between views and components. Spoiler alert on this is in Vue, just like React, everything's a component. But psychologically, we differentiate between these two kinds of things. You could kind of think of this like containers and children, except it's a little bit more strict than that even. Really, a view is a thing that we route to. Every URL should route directly to a view, and that view should do data fetching, set state, all of those kinds of things, and then your components kind of shouldn't. You try to keep your components as dumb as possible. And then this is the app. This is our top level component. This main.js file bootstraps the application. We very rarely have to do anything with this. This is our router, and then this is our like Redux style store. And so if we're tracing the logic on how we got from here to here, this is the index, the root URL. And so whenever the path is that, we render this component. This component comes from views, home.view, and it's got this hello world component that it brought in and made available to the template. Template used that component just like it does in React, and all of that renders inside of app.view because that's how the router works. So what we're going to do now, and I'm trying to think if I want you to follow along with me on this. Yeah, let's. So I want you to follow along with me on this. We're going to delete a lot of this stuff. We're going to go to source, assets, and this logo that it gave us. Get rid of it. Don't need it. And then this component that it gave us, the hello world component, go ahead and get rid of that too. And the views, we're going to get rid of these also. And then in app.view, we're going to keep this one. But I want to delete everything but this div ID app. And then delete all the styles for it too. So it should look like that. And then one last thing, over in router, we're going to get rid of home. And we're going to get rid of all the routes. So we should have something that kind of looks like that. And if you did it right, you should be able to see that same page without it throwing an error. I'll give you a sec to get there. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you're ready. Go to Yeah, don't do that. You still want the folder. But that's probably not why. Go to, let me see your rudder. You're still recording. Beautiful. Hey there, cat. Cool. What you got?
Just view creations.
Uh-oh. Yeah, did you just install UCLI?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that was fine.
Cool. Try updating do node space dash B. Alright, we'll debug this after. Alright. Onward. So first thing we want to do is at this root URL, let's try to get this header put together. So we're going to go into app.view and this works a lot like JSX does. You need to have one parent element inside of template, but there's no render function, there's no any of that kind of shit. We get to write pretty regular HTML. So I can say something like, all right, I want a header, and I want an H1 that says backwire, and I want to put an image. And maybe I'll look up like a puppy paw. Perfect. Let's grab some image, throw it in there. And this is one of my favorite things that we can do with this. In the style thing, we can style this component here, and all we have to do to enable SCSS syntax is that declaration right there, because we installed it when we were creating the app. So I can do something like hashtag app, and if you haven't used SCSS, then if there's one feature that you need to know about this, is that you can nest selectors. So I can do something like that and target any header that's inside app. Like that alone is just a thing of beauty, man. Cool. So let's see how the app is. Cool. So that's what I have for the app right now. And I need to make that image smaller. So I can do things like target image tags that are inside headers that are inside of $app and say that the width is maybe 150 pixels. Cool. And then I can also say I want the header to flex, and I want to justify content to flex start. And I'm going to flip the order on these. And align items center, maybe? There we go. Cool, and that's going to be the header for Barkwire. And give it a little, and give that header a color too. Background color, HSL, let's go with a blue, red, green, blue, 240, desaturated, kind of light. Interesting. Why I didn't get the you don't have to do this, but I'm going to get rid of the padding on the body And the margin. Better. Oh, I see why. This isn't a transparent background on the paw. It's like actually a white image. Smart part. All right, so, all right, this is gonna be the header for our app. Now, what we can do is, just like we do with view router, we can say, all right, I wanna render things inside of here. I think of it like a hole that gets punched through the view, that anything you do inside of that will then show up. And so the way that we do that is wherever you want to put it, like I'm going to make a couple main tags here. You use this built-in component called router view, just like that. And that's saying anything that routes through this gets displayed like in place of that. And we'll call that component dogs. So I want you to make, like, touch src views and make a file in that views folder called dogs with a capital D .view, not .js. Super common mistake is to use .js extensions for view components. They should all be .view. So we're going to make that. And then we're just going to make sure that, like, we got this wired up. We're going to do our smoke test. And so the way that we make a template for a component is we just wrap it in these template tags. And we can do something like just put dogs here to make sure that the component is showing up. So I want to underscore this folder hierarchy we're using again. The app.view file, top level component, shows up on every single route. Any route inside of that is going to get swapped out with the router view component. And we want to take this views file and make that, this H2 show up in that hole. And the way that we do that is by going into the router and making a route for it. So you're going to add an object inside this array, and we're looking for three things. We're looking for the path that should match. So if we want to just be the default, that's that path. We want to give it a name, so we can call it like index. And then we need to say what component should render whenever we're trying to render this route. And so we'll call it dogs, and then we just need to import dogs. And we're going to import dogs from, this is a really neat Vue CLI thing. If you use the @ symbol, the @ symbol is a shortcut for your source directory. So you can say @views dogs.view. You don't need the .view, but you can put it in if you want to. And if we do this, we did this correctly, we should see that dogs H2 right below our header. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Let's get this far. Throw up a hand if you need help. Yeah, on my way. Cool. Got a problem? Beautiful. They do it more. Beautiful. Yes. Got it, Ethan? What? Okay. Okay, so that means that we have that view showing up in here. Now we can do some stuff with it. So the design was want to have like a list of dogs or something, and you click on one, and it makes something else show up here. So let's go over that dogs component and figure out how to do that. So we can say, let's wrap this all in a div, because just like React, it needs one top level component. If I try to do something like that, it's going to go, you need exactly one root element. And a convention I like to use is give that top level element a class name with the name of whatever component you're using. We can make a style for this component, and if we want to enable SCSS, lang equals SCSS.
Under an autofill of scoped, just like you guys
Yeah,
did.
so scoped does a similar kind of thing. Actually, let's take a look at that, because it's kind of an interesting thing. I'm doing the exact same thing that scoped wants to do, which is, all right, I've got this, it's called a namespace, and then I'm limiting every style that I'm applying here to this namespace. You can also do a similar thing with scoped. Actually, let's take a look at the HTML that gets generated by this. All right, so I've got this class of dogs, and then I can, apply styles and stuff to that. If I do scoped, see how it adds this little data thing to it? What it does is it'll actually do that to everything inside of it also. And so if I say that H2s in here should have a padding of 5 ems, then check out the selector that it wrote for this. So, and like what's powerful about that is now you don't need to do the thing that I did. It'll still be very narrowly scoped, because there's only one H2 that is going to have that attribute attached to it. That's what scoped does. The problem is it doesn't work for dynamically created elements, which drives me fucking crazy. So that's why I usually do the scoping myself. But two ways of accomplishing the same thing. This is way less performant, but I think it reads better and has less problems with dynamically created stuff. Okay, so awesome. I don't actually want 5 ems on that. And let's say we want to show a list of dogs. So we're going to make an unordered list, and for each dog, dog listing, we'll call it. Put a div in there, and a dog listing has an image. Let's say it has an image. And let's look up cute dog. Grab any picture you want, throw it in there, and then we'll give this an H3 of some name. And let's make like 3 of those. Cool. So that's going to end up being like our nav bar. Oh, actually, shoot. We don't want the images on those. We want that on like the actual dog card. So, well, no, that's fine. We can keep them. Just make them tiny, like thumbnails. All right, perfect. So now I want to make those little. So maybe we do something like, all right, inside of dog listing, any image should have a width of 75 pixels. Maybe a little more, 100. Cool. And I'm going to say that the H3 inside of that should have like padding of 0, margin of 0. Okay. But the dog listing itself should have a margin bottom of 2 rems. Cool. And then the way that we get rid of those dots is if we target ULs inside of dogs, you can go list style none, and it makes the dots go away. All right, cool. So I have this list of dogs in the side, but wait a minute, that seems awfully repetitive. So what we'd probably do is have like a state with some dogs in it. We'd list those dogs like in an array of objects or something, and then loop through them. So in React, we would map through that and like poop out a bunch of JSX elements. We have a much easier way to do that in Vue. We're going to start with a script tag. Goes in between the template and the style. And we're going to export default this object. This is where like all the Vue-y magic goes. So let's start with data. This works exactly like state does in React, except it needs to be a function. Oops. Yep. There we go. Hang on. There we are. So data needs to be a function, which you can write with like the object shorthand like that. You can also do that, same thing. And it needs to return whatever the current state is. So we'll say that there's a list of dogs that's an array, and a dog has a name and an image URL. I'll say name is Bowser, and that image URL is the one that we pulled down. Cool. And let's make a couple of those. All right, so now in my state for this view, I have these 3 dogs. Pretty dope. To use those in this template, you make an example of like one of the ones that like whatever you want it to look like. And then you do v-for equals, and this works a lot like a for-in loop does in JavaScript. You say for dog in dogs. Yeah way. And now dog is available as a variable inside of this that we can just use wherever. So the way that we use it is 2 different syntaxes that you should be familiar with. Inside of an element, if you want the text to show up, 2 braces, not 1, dog.name. And just doing that, yep, we still got Bowser showing up. And then if it's inside of an attribute, what we need to do is make the attribute bound, which we do by just putting a colon in front of it. Now, whatever's in these quotes isn't a string like it is here. It's arbitrary JavaScript. So we can do stuff like dog.image URL inside of that. That works. We can even change their names to Waggy and Percy. Oop. And there they are. So to review, we made an example of the thing that we wanted to make, and we said, I would like you to make one of these for every dog in dogs. So this is going to get repeated. This dog variable is going to be each individual dog, just like it is in like a map or a for each or something like that. We can use double mustaches if we want to like just make a string show up. And we can put a colon in front of an attribute if we want to use some variable in there. But it's worth noting that like inside of those bound attributes, I can put this in template strings and interpolate this and add whatever. It's just JavaScript. Anything you can do in JavaScript, you can do inside of a bound attribute like that. Pretty dope. Questions so far?
So in whatever I downloaded quick extension, it's giving me the red squiggly under that V4 saying that it needs.
It needs a key?
Yeah.
So same thing as in React. So we need something that uniquely identifies the dogs. So like if we give them each an ID. You give them each an ID, and then inside, like right next to this v4, you bind key to dog.id. That'll make it go away. Other questions? The easiest thing to screw up when you're doing this sort of like state stuff is having your data, like your data needs to be a function, not an object. Everything else in Vue is an object. And have it return an object that represents your current state. That one's tricky to remember, but the rest of it's kind of straightforward. Other questions? Yeah.
If you want to add an event listener, where do you write the function for that?
Events, much like in React, are done differently. And we'll talk about that in a sec. Because I think they're way more robust than they are in React. But just like React, we're pretty much never working with the actual DOM. And so we can't do any actual DOM things. Good question. What else?
How do you set state?
Cool, we'll get there. Anything else? Neat. So now that I got all these showing up, I kind of want to move this state into a state management system, mayhaps. So we installed one called Vuex. And if you go to source/store.js, this is what we got. And so this state, if I want to keep track of my dogs here, I make a dogs key. And I can take all this, yank it out, and throw it into that. Now my application store is keeping track of my dogs. And I don't need this data key anymore. But Kyle, how do you access the dogs? I'm so glad you asked. we're going to make a key called computed, and this is an object. And let's say we want to make something called dogs available to the templates. Make a function called dogs. And again, same thing, you can use the function the method shorthand, or you can write it out long ways. Most of you people write it out shorthand. And we say, all right, what is it? We can return an empty object, we can do whatever. If you want to access the store, it's this $store.state.dogs. And if we go back to our template, they're all still there. Yeah! Neat. Now we got rid of all that fucking logic out of the view, which is nice. But probably don't want to hard code the state of the dogs. So we're going to pretend like we're fetching this. We have actions and mutations. My recommendation would be to use actions as what your views use to like fetch data and stuff. Actions can't change the state. Only mutations can. So actions call mutations, mutations call state. Actions can be synchronous or asynchronous, but here's the rub. Mutations have to be synchronous. Let's see what that looks like. I make an action called fetch dogs. And it takes in, we're going to destructure the commit method. Commit is how you do a mutation. Then we can say something like promise.resolve. That's going to be our fake fetch. It's asynchronous, but we have the data hard-coded. Promise.resolve and, well, let's see. Is that how I want to do this? No. Oh, yeah. Promise.resolve.then. So if you just want to start a .then chain out of nowhere, you can do it off of promise.resolve. Yeah. And take some function, and we can say, all right, I want to commit set dogs, which is going to be a mutation, and I want to give it this list of dogs. And so if I go, cool, here's a list of dogs, then it's going to try to commit those. So over here, we need to make a function called setDogs. And it's going to take in the state object, and it's going to take in the dogs that we just gave it. And all we need to do is state.dogs equals dogs. So what we should have now is no dogs showing up. Perfect. But whenever we correct vocab is dispatch this action, it's going to asynchronously, magically commit this list of dogs. This mutation is going to take the dogs we gave it, and it's going to set the state. And so if I go, all right, whenever this component is mounted, that's a lifecycle hook. What I want you to do is this.store.dispatch fetch dogs. And now, there they are. So what happened is, this component mounted, we called this function, dispatched it. Meanwhile, dogs is set to whatever store.state.dogs is. It starts as an empty array, So no list items get created because there's nothing to v4 over. This fake fetches a bunch of dogs, and then we commit them. This is asynchronous. This has to be synchronous. So we call that, we set the state of the dogs to whatever got passed in here, and it gets set. Now, this component re-renders because there's dogs. Yeah.
What does the syntax look like for when you actually pass something in on the phone?
It's just comma separated. So I can go, I only want to get a particular ID. So you do something like that. And now fetch dogs takes commit and some ID. Yep. Other questions?
So, do you have dogs on your page at this point?
Caps lock. Yep, there they are. My little buddies.
Mine is blank for some reason.
Let me see. Good. Both those are right. And let me see your store. Your actions, such dogs, stuff. Yes. Good. Refresh. Let me see your console over here. Unknown actions, fetch dogs. There you go. Other questions?
I'm guessing, well, what if you're fetching from outside of your own app, I guess?
That works the exact same thing. We can swap out this promise.resolve with fetch whatever, and then it works the exact same way. Promise.resolve was just a way to make this asynchronous. Other questions? Cool. So now that we have all this working, really, even this might be a little bit too much for a view. So what I want to do is make, I'm going to touch src components dog list. I guess you can keep the convention the same. Dog list.view. And if we go over to dog list, we can make a template. We can make a script. We can make a style. And in the template for dog list, we're just going to take this whole thing. I call that class dog list. We're going to see, all right, so that UL and these dog listings, these really should all go over here. And they should be inside of dog list. Cool. And then the way that we make this available to this template is by importing it. Just like we did in React, we'll go import dog list from source components dog list. And then inside this, we just enumerate what components are available in the template. Like that. That's it. We imported the component, and then we put it inside of this components object. And now, instead of all this, we can go dog list, and we can say, just like we did in React, dogs is dogs. And we had to bind this because dogs is this computed, it's JavaScript. If we didn't have the colon, any guesses what would happen?
Just system-wise, it's true.
Passes the string dogs in. And sometimes you want to do that, that's fine. But if it's JavaScript, we got to put the colon in front. All right, and now we need to tell dogs list or dog list that we're expecting that to be passed in as a prop. So we export default, and we say props. And I kind of like this. Props is an object, and it takes in the name of the prop that you're expecting to pass in, so like dogs, and then the type that you expect it to be, and it'll bark at you, no pun intended, if you pass the wrong type in. It's like poor man type checking. So we say array capital A, and if array is somewhere in its prototype chain, it'll do it without complaining. All right, are they all still there? They're all still there. Now, you might be asking, because this would be the React way to do it, all right, well, I have this dogs list component. Why wouldn't I just throw dogs over here and not pass it in? The reason is we want to keep the components dumb. Views can do whatever they want with the store. In fact, it's really all they should be doing. We keep the components dumb because it makes them easy to test. The same reason we like dumb components in React. We say, okay, this component shows a list of dogs, and it takes the dogs in. It doesn't give a it's not also in charge of retrieving the dogs. All it does is take dogs and display them. Then this view, its job is to get a list of dogs and give them to the people that need them. Much more limited responsibilities. Yeah?
Can you scroll up to your template on this? Awesome, thank you.
Cool. There's one more thing I want to show you. I want to show you the changing state and events stuff. So I'm going to skip the nested router view, and let's say inside of a dog listing, maybe you want to click a dog's picture and it increments a like count or something like that. So what we'll do is let's see, how do I want to do this? All right, in each of these, I'm going to say, so I have the dog list. Do one more thing. I'm going to make this dog listing into a component also. So we'll touch src components dog listing. Same thing. We're going to make a template. And we're just going to take in this div that we have right there. Pop it in. Template's done. And then we're going to make a script. And we're going to export default. Takes in props. Props is an object. It has a key of dog, which should be an object. And then we're going to make a style that should be lang SCSS. Oops. Over in our dog list, we can take this dog listing style we made and put it over here. Thing of beauty. And then we need to import this dog listing component that we made. Import dog listing from @ which again is an alias for source, components, dog listing. We need to make that component available inside of the template. We do that with components, dog listing. And if we do it just like this, like we did before, that's identical to that, in case you've forgotten. But if the name is the same as the variable you're assigning it to, you can just do that. Then inside of this, we'll do dog listing and dog equals dog. Anybody remember our vocab word for when this view fetches dogs, and we're passing the dogs here, and the dog here, and the dog here? It's 2 words. First one starts with a P. Prop drilling. Click a prop here, and we're just passing down to get it where it needs to go. All right, everything's still basically the same, except my UL doesn't take my list type anymore. Dog list? Weird. Cool. So I've got these things. I want something where, like, when I click on a dog listing, it increments something. And so the way that we do that is with the @ symbol. So we say @ and you can say click. If it's a built-in JavaScript thing like click is, you need to do .native. Because the most powerful thing about this, and this is the thing I missed the most in React, is you can make custom events really easily, which we'll see in a sec. Say, all right, whenever this gets clicked, we're going to upvote dog, and then we're going to pass in the dog.id. Let's take a look at that for a sec. Whenever this dog listing is clicked on, call the method upvote dog and pass in the ID, which we have from this v4. And what I can do inside here is make there's a methods object. And if I do upvote dog in here that takes in an ID, this is a component. I don't want to do any kind of state management or state fuckery inside components. Only want to do those inside views. So I'm going to just pass this up as an event. This is, I think, one of the biggest practical differences between how you organize shit in Vue versus React. In the React world, we would have had this outer component and this inner component where we have state and then the means to change that state. We pass both of them in, and then this thing calls that change function. It doesn't work that way at all in React. In Vue. It can, but I think it's always been a stupid pattern. Better way to do that would be I have state here, and then this fires off an event that I listen for, and when that event happens, say on whatever event, you handle the change that way. So instead of passing everything all the way down, including those functions, the state goes down, your props goes down, and events come up, just like we do with the DOM. Yeah.
Off topic, but
Yeah.
like, throw you a reminder, problem.
Right. Got it. Are they out of obvious thing yet? Okay. So, yeah, we're just listening for events on elements. Components are essentially like custom elements. And so why would we use completely different metaphors for those? So we have events, we can listen to them, we can add event listeners. So this is essentially what we're doing here, is we're saying, all right, when that gets clicked on, I want this thing to handle it. And so we'll say, all right, I want to just pass this, I want to bubble this event up. And so I'm going to say this dot $emit upvote dog and give it the ID. And now, over on this dog view, I can listen for that same thing, upvote dog, and whenever that gets called, I do the same thing. Upvote dog, and then pass. And actually, I don't even need to declare the thing because it'll get passed along. So we drill props down, and we're just kind of bubbling these events up. I emitted this event, upvote dog. I listened for that event, and I'm going to call this thing to handle it. It's going to get all the same arguments. Like methods, upvote dog, takes in an ID. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to dispatch something to the store. Say this dot store dot dispatch upvote dog, give it the ID that I got. And then in that store, if I make an action called upvote dog, hey, now I'm where the state lives, and I can do something with that. So I'll call that upvote dog. Just like above, it takes in commit and an ID. And there's nothing asynchronous we need to handle here, so we can just go right for the mutation. We're going to commit upvote dog. We're going to give it the ID. And then over in this mutation, upvote dog takes in state, gets the ID. And what we'll do here is we need to find the dog that's being upvoted, and we just increment whatever the fuck on it. So we do state dot dogs dot find and I'm relatively sure we can do this. Dog dot votes plus plus. And so we'll give each of these dogs votes. And in our dog listing, we'll just make them show up. Now paragraph tag. Dog dot votes. All right, where did I screw up? There we go. Missed a comma on these. Cool. So they have no votes, and if I click on them, there we go. Votes go up. So, quick review. The router. App shows up in everything, so it's not in the router. This is just showing things that go inside of, remember what it was called? the hole that we punched through the view. What was it? Template is everything that shows up in this component. The hole that I punched through it to show other components is router view. So I'm saying app is on every page, but if the URL matches this, show this inside router view. The dogs view, which is mostly in charge of just getting a bunch of data and handling any kind of state management stuff, whenever it mounts, dispatches this action. That action makes a fetch request, gets some dogs, commits a mutation. This mutation takes in dogs, sets the state of the app. Back over here, we've aliased whatever the state of the dogs is to this thing, which the template can see, and passes that down as a prop. This thing is looking for that prop, and for each one of those, makes a dog listing. Dog listing's another component. That thing's looking for a dog object, makes the dog stuff show up. Also, whenever we click on a dog listing, we want this method to handle it, and it emits an event that we just made up. That's not a normal DOM event. And then over here, we're listening for that event, which has this handler, which dispatches this action in the store. And then commits this mutation, which finds the relevant dog and alters its state. That's view. Like from simple view apps to like fairly complex ones, that's pretty much all that's happening. What questions do you have? So remember, actions are I think of this as the API for your store that your application can use. These are like the actions that your app is allowed to take on the state. The mutations are how it accomplishes that state change. What else? Yeah.
Once fetch dog's actually happening, is that just like on mount? Is that how we
Yep. Whenever this component is mounted, and this is just like React, it has like a series of lifecycle hooks. When that hook fires, this goes. Now, it doesn't stop the rest of the rendering of the component. It doesn't block it at all. It just starts that process from happening. And so it starts by passing an empty array in here, but as soon as this finishes, it's an array of dogs. Good question.
So by telling it it's that array type, that's how it knows that's awesome.
Indeed. And it's even cooler than that. If you were using classes or something like that, it just looks for something in the prototype chain that matches this. So we could have a dog constructor or something and say that whatever, that should be a capital D dog. And I'll type check that too. What else? Yeah.
manually routing, you would create actions or methods for all this as well? Like, so if you're like to click a link, so to speak, then you have a method that leads to an action that renders that view?
No, it's way easier than that. If we had another route here called hi, and we made a component called hi in views. And over in hi, all it is a template that says hi. Then if we want to link to that, over in our dogs view, there's a helper for it. We'll say, all right, there's the dogs list, but also if you want to go to the hi page, router link, and we say, I want to send that to the route that's named hi. And this just gets turned into an anchor tag when you compile the app. You'll say something like that. And all right, so I have this link here. And when I go there, it says hi. And my favorite feature of that is like, I'm sending it to the route that's named hi. I'm not sending it to a specific path though. It just needs to be named that. So if I change that path to anything else, check this shit out. It updates the URL. Because the name of the URL, who gives a shit? It's the name of the route that I care about. And so, for example, on the Develop Denver site, we used to call the URL /tickets, and then Michael Dusing got angry with me and did a bunch of research. It's like, it should be conference badges. You're buying a conference badge, you're not buying a ticket. And so all I had to do was change that line in the router, and then all the URLs say that now. The route was still named tickets. That's pretty cool. Cool. I got to hop into the other lesson, but I'll do one more. What else you want to know?
I just want to confirm so that click.native is just taken from the store then.
So click native, the reason we had to put the native thing on it, let's see, where was that? Dog listing. Is because click, otherwise it's going to look for like an event that we made up called click. Since we want the actual browser event, that's why we have to specify that we want the native one. And what this is doing is when this click DOM event happens, that's the handler for it. And you notice we didn't need to, even though we're passing in this, we didn't have to do that goofy closer shit that you do in React, where you do like ID fucking return the function. Pretty cool.
And then last thing to clarify, emit specifically bubble up that then to the parent.
Yes, but unlike DOM events, it doesn't keep bubbling. You need to like manually bubble it each time, which is why we bubbled that up to this, and we're listening for it there. But all we did with that is, anyway, we could have kept bubbling that up, but we would have to. It doesn't keep going up through the component hierarchy. Good. Awesome. Thank you very much.